Hi everyone, welcome. So we are here today again for another IMG stories on our series of global VMR. And today we are very excited to have Dr. Mirza here. So let's start with some introductions. Dr. Mirza, he completed his medical school at the Aga Khan University of Karachi, Pakistan. He then completed his PhD at the University of Illinois at Chicago in 2010. He continued his training at the University of Chicago, where he completed an AP and CP pathology residency. During this time, he was elected to be the chief resident and won several awards, including Pathologists in Training Awards from the Society of Pediatric Pathology and the Society of Uterostructural Pathology. He continued his training at the University of Chicago and received fellowship training in hemopathology and thoracic pathology. Given his passion for medical education, he completed a fellowship in medical education research, innovation, teaching, and scholarship at the University of Chicago. And currently, Dr. Mirza is an associate professor of pathology and laboratory medicine and medical education and serves as the vice chair of education in the Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine, and is an assistant dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion at the Loyola University Chicago Street School of Medicine in Maywood, Illinois. So welcome, Dr. Mirza. We are so excited to have you here. So if you could please unmute yourself and just tell us a little bit about you and what you like to do outside of medicine.
Sure. Thank you for that kind introduction and for having me share my story. You introduced me, and I love hemopath, so I'm a pathologist. I have a passion for pathology now in medical education, and I'm also really well known now for trying to convince everyone to do pathology. So that's kind of my thing. And outside of medicine, I have three daughters, so I'm a girl dad. They're all different ages, so lots of involvement with their activities. I also, as we were discussing before, it went live. I do like to garden, although now everything is very cold and barren in Chicago. Today it dropped under freezing, and so no more gardening for me for a while. But I do like to start some flowering plants in the spring inside the house. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'm pretty certain that by the end of today's session, you'll know much more about me.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. We also have Rafa and Deborah. They are going to help us during the session. So Rafa, if you can please unmute yourself and introduce you, and then Deborah.
Hi everyone, my name is Rafael and I'm a fresh Brazilian medical graduate. Super excited to be here to listen to Dr. Mirza's incredible story. And I'll pass the mic to the amazing Deborah.
Hi everyone, I'm Deborah. I'm from Brazil, medical student in Argentina. And yeah, I'm super excited for today and it will be a great section.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think Deborah has a question first. So go ahead, Deborah. Thank you.
Okay, let's start. So the first question is, what do you miss the most in Pakistan?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was thinking about this and I was wondering what I will say, whether it'll be the food, whether it'll be, what it'll be. I think that I miss the people. And I think the easiest way to capture the fact that my family is obviously there. My mom is there, my sister, her kids, her husband. So I only have one sister. So I have a small family unit, but then I have lots of amazing cousins, and the majority of them are still back in Pakistan. And then I have friends. So I think that, there are lots of things. Originally, I would have said, oh, things like food and all of this stuff. But to be honest with you, the food I can still get here in the United States, and my wife is a fantastic cook too. So I think that ultimately it is the people that I miss, and the connections that obviously I made growing up with them as well.
Yeah, incredible answer, Dr. Mirza, and I can see how much you miss your country. So maybe regarding that aspect, maybe you could talk a little bit about your favorite places and favorite food and places to visit in Pakistan.
Sure. So I am from a city called Lahore, Pakistan. That's where I was born. And it's a historic city. If you wanted to, I don't know, Wikipedia it, it's the it's got roots in the Mughal Empire. And so there are some gorgeous kind of old forts and palaces and really beautiful things. It was part of I think it was definitely part of like the old Silk Road in the subcontinent as well. So I'm from Lahore, and that's kind of where I like to go when I go back. I did medical school in Karachi, which is a southern city on the coast. My favorite food, it's probably too many things to list, to be honest with you. But I think one thing two things that I really, really enjoy when I go back. One is this juice that is made from sugarcane, and basically they put the sugarcane kind of in a machine, and it just crushes the sugarcane, and and kind of the juice comes out, and then they put like this like seasoning on it, because everything has to be a little bit spicy, and it is so good. And I could when used to live there, I could have it like every day, like if I wanted to. But in general, good, Deborah. I'm glad that you have it there too. And obviously, it has to be kind of clean, etc. And so now when I go back, I feel like my immunity isn't that good, but I still try and have it whenever I can. And the other thing is called golgappe. I can't explain it. It's basically like it's like a crap it's got a very tangy, spicy liquid, and you use like a little it's like a sphere, which is made of like a very thin kind of a cracker crust, and you pop a hole in it, and then you dip the soup in it, and then you eat it. It's a street food, and it's called golgappe. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually find it on Google, and I'm going to put it in the chat so that people can see what it looks like. Anyway, so those are what I would say.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I really want to see that because sounds like delicious. We, like Deborah said in the chat, we have that sugarcane juice here in Brazil, and it's like addicting. My grandmother, she loves that, so I can see how you miss that. So like moving on, Dr. Mirza, could you please talk about your journey to come to the US? How was it?
Yeah, so my journey to the US was similar probably to your journeys in many ways, right? And so I grew up in England. So I was born in Pakistan. I actually moved with my parents to England. They're both physicians, and they were training in England. And so I moved back to Pakistan when I was kind of a young teenager. And then medical school in Pakistan, similar to probably many of your countries, starts kind of right out of high school. You do like a year of like freshman year. Yeah. And so you don't have like undergrad. And so I started medical school when I was 17, 18 years old. And then I was done when we were 22, 23, just like all of you guys, I'm sure. And at that time, I met my wife in medical school. We got married right after, and we took the step exams. And then the year after, we moved here to the US. So the idea was to get residency here, and there were some ups and downs, which I'm sure we'll get to with the questioning. But yeah, that was my journey. I was very lucky because my medical school had a lot of people who do come to the US. And so there was not a pipeline, but like there were people that I could ask and, run questions by and use them for guidance and mentorship. And so we were able to do that, which I thought was very helpful. My medical school, we only have like 75 to 100 medical students a year graduating. It's not a very big school. And many of them do come to the United States for residency training. A lot go to Australia or England as well. But in general, that was the pathway that my wife and I thought made most sense. And our parents supported us. And so, yeah, we ended up here.
Continue, I think, talking about the same answer that you were saying now. And what were the reasons that made you go to US?
Yeah, so, of course, we had to kind of consider. So my wife and I were married. We had our firstborn, who's actually, interestingly, turning 18 next week. So so I have an 18-year-old, which is pretty crazy to me to think about. So we had her, and the question obviously was whether we're going to stay back in the country or whether we're going to go abroad for training. I think in general, Pakistan is a country where, similar to all of your countries, there is a brain drain where everyone kind of, a lot of people leave, after becoming, trained. It's not ideal, but, we also followed the same path where, my parents had done the same thing where they had trained abroad, and then in their case, they had come back. And many people do that, where they leave and they train abroad because of this, kind of strategic and organized training programs that are available abroad. There's some incredible training programs also in Pakistan, but I thought that the opportunities for pathology training would be pretty interesting, and in the US. And I was very lucky to kind of be able to move here.
But there's a question related to that. How did you endure the migration process? Any tips for all the IMGs watching us?
Yasmin, do you really want me to tell you? Because it's kind of a horror story. So yeah, the migration process was not easy for me. And the reason, if I am going to share it, I'll share it because I know that the struggle is real. And, I can say that, but I'm sure you won't believe me until I tell you the story. So buckle up. So my migration story is this. So my wife was already a green card holder. All right. So we thought it would be easy for me to just get a green card. And so for her, the pathway was that when she would move here for residency, ultimately she would just be on the pathway to becoming a citizen, and then she'd become a citizen, and it would be fine, right? And so for my daughter and for her, things were good. So she and I decided that I'm going to apply for residency first so that I get a visa. Obviously, I would need a visa to come to the country, right? And so that was what she decided to do. So she decided to wait a year and kind of do some other jobs and take care of our daughter. So I came here to the US and interviewed and matched in a residency program right out of medical school. And then I went back, after the kind of when the match happened, took step 3 and then went back and waited for the match results. And then the match was great. I matched in my number 2 spot that I wanted, which I thought was pretty spectacular. Actually, I wasn't expecting it to be so good, but in any case, I was very lucky. But then I was also very unlucky because I got my visa, and actually I was about to get my visa. There were a lot of processing delays, and you guys are very young, but this was very post 9/11 United States of America, right? And so as you can tell, you can't tell from my name, but my name is Kamran Muhammad Mirza. Actually, it used to be Muhammad Kamran Mirza at the time. And obviously I'm a Muslim. And in 2005, in July, when I was supposed to come here for residency, we were supposed to fly on July 1st, obviously for the residency to start. I had paid for housing, I'd paid for insurance, everything was set. And then in the first week of July, there was a bombing in London in the subway. And the people who bombed it apparently were British citizens, but they had Pakistani origins. And at the time, the United States called back the visas that it had issued for several months to Pakistani citizens, which included my visa. So they called it back for a security clearance, and I wrote to my department and I said, my visa is going through a second security clearance right now, and so can you please give me a week of vacation so that I can, start like a week late. So they had a meeting amongst themselves, and the next day they basically wrote to me and they said, well, you were supposed to be here and you're not here. So they canceled my residency contract on July 6th. And they basically gave the job to an unmatched candidate. And the next day my visa came. So, but I couldn't travel anymore because they had already given my spot to someone else and it was just irrevocable. So this was my start to my migration journey, Yasmin. This is how it started. And I lost my residency, the money that I had given to the housing. And that was it. There was, no social media kind of help. There wasn't a very robust Pakistani community at the time. I mean, there was, but we weren't together. Like now there's a Pakistani Association of Pathologists. So there's like so many, people I could have complained to or talked to, or, groups like CP Solvers. Like, I mean, you have groups now, but this was 2005 and it was a little bit different. So, I mean, it was the worst time of our lives, really. Like, we had pushed everything, now I had a kid and a wife who was waiting, and I had no residency and nothing else. And the question was, it's July already. So that means that I have to put everything together again for September for ERAS if I wanted to go again. And then the question was, would we couples match? So I decided that, no, I'm not going to do it. I was just very upset. And I decided to change my route and apply for research as a postdoc. And I said, to my wife that, she had waited a year, so it's her time now to go for the match. So I got a postdoc position in Chicago. And she came, we've all traveled. I got a visa, obviously, with the postdoc position. And so between July and November, we waited for all of the new paperwork. And in November, 1st of November, actually, 2005, we moved to the US, and my wife did her step 2 CK. She did her interviews and she matched, and I started as a postdoc. And then I liked the research work, so I switched into a graduate program and did a PhD, because ultimately what I realized was that we were in Chicago, and it was like similar programs I was applying to. So ultimately I ended up spending 4 years doing a PhD while my wife did her medicine residency and her chief year. And then ultimately, after like many years, her she became a citizen, then I got a green card, and then ultimately I got citizenship here as well. So that's a very long story. And I was still very lucky because she became a citizen. So my pathway to citizenship was easy. But I'm here to tell you that if there's anyone who can complain about visa situations, it's me, because of what ended up happening to me. And I really just hope and wish that it never happens to anyone else.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that happened to you, Dr. Mirza. Visa issues are certainly a problem. I tried to do my Subaya in the US, and it took me like 8 months to be able to schedule a visa appointment because of the COVID pandemic. The queues were so large.
Yeah.
I guess they are catching up right now, but oh my God, that was such difficult process. So
Yeah.
I can relate to that. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, like a bad and a good moment that you remember from when you moved to the US.
Should I tell you about more bad moments? Yeah, how bad do you really want more bad moments? I'm just joking. So let me tell you about a good moment. A good moment was when we were landing. We were landing at O'Hare Airport in Chicago, and we had finally everything had come through, and my wife and my little daughter, who was about to turn 1, we were landing, and it was the fall because it was November 1st. I remember it, right? And as the plane kind of came into Chicago, like it was fall and all the trees were red, and it looked like the ground was on fire. It looked so beautiful because it was orange and red, and it was just so gorgeous. And at that moment, for me, that struggle for 1 year, having, come to the US, interviewed, these were all in-person interviews. I had bought like a $100 Greyhound ticket, which would just basically take me to all these places. I traveled on bus from New York to Chicago, Chicago to New York. Like I basically did all of these things. I took trains, I lived in people's houses and slept on the floor. We did all of these things and then ultimately the residency was lost to me. And so then there were the months of struggling and thinking about what we're going to do. And so that landing in O'Hare was such a big culmination of a year of events. And so I think that if I ever land now, I mean, obviously I travel. And so if I travel and I land in the fall, I'm always taken back to that moment when we were landing for the first time. And we finally it was, that journey was over. So that I would say that was a very good feeling. Let's leave it at that.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mirza, for sharing that with us. I could imagine in my head all that the struggle and everything, and finally having that feeling of arriving there, getting there, right? So thank you so much. And besides all those problems with the visa, as an IMG, what were the most significant hardship that you had to overcome during the residency and the fellowship?
So I think that I was lucky because then I was in grad school here, and I was fortunate in many ways because medicine is taught in English in Pakistan, and then I had grown up in England. So even though English is my second language, it came pretty naturally to me. And then there were I to be honest with you, I really don't think that beyond the visa issue I felt significant hardship. I did have to consider my family situation when I applied for residency because my wife was already a resident in Chicago. We had 2 kids by that time. And so I did have to have a limited application, just in the area because many IMGs specifically struggle with staying apart from spouses and partners, and that, and I respect that very much. But ideally, it would have been great if we didn't do that. And so my wife and I really tried to do that. So I don't think that was specifically a hardship because I was lucky. I ended up staying in Chicago, training at the University of Chicago. And so I think that there's a big jump between medical school and pathology residency in general, because, we aren't exposed to pathology very well during medical education. I'm sure none of you guys are really, unless you do an elective. And so I also had now 4 years in between in which I had been away from medical school. I was obviously doing research, bench work, and, I was very good at research methods, but I hadn't thought about clinical medicine for a couple of years. So I think that that would probably be one hardship where, I had to kind of enter the world of medicine after kind of a rocky migration story. But I think that, I had very supportive co-residents, very supportive program. Eventually the program I ended up going to was a very supportive program. And, I can't complain. I think that even though this journey, seems like, even though this journey seems very difficult for me, I think that there were lessons that I learned from that journey that I can look back on. And they were very important lessons for me to learn. And I think that it sounds cliche, but it's very important to remember that everything that happens really does happen for a reason. So that entire shift in my journey was important for me to end up achieving or doing the things that I ended up doing. And so I would say that whether it be the COVID-19 pandemic or visa issues, I would try to encourage you all to take every challenge as an opportunity to grow and to learn from, and to kind of take those lessons and keep them in your minds.
I love that. So as we were talking about pathology, what made you choose pathology?
Yeah, so I saw that I think somebody had asked, Matthew had asked about why I chose heme path too. So I have two answers to this question. Both of them are truthful. One is the uninspirational answer, which I'll tell you. I still hate the rat race. I hate it when everybody just wants to do the same thing. I did not want to become, and I'm just going to be honest because I'm assuming I'm with a bunch of IMGs. I just did not want to become another brown person who does cardiology. I'm just being honest with you. I didn't want to become another brown person who does like ophthalmology or so, and I wanted to do something different. I've always wanted to do something different. And so I was purposefully looking for something that is different. I found pathology kind of indirectly during medical school. One of our professors, currently I think she was even the chair of my department, of my alma mater. She had finished residency and fellowship in the United States and just moved back. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is an amazing woman who is a fantastic educator, and she's a breast pathologist. And I was like, I didn't even know that that's actually a thing, or that physicians do it. So that really piqued my interest. And there was a friend of mine, one of my closest friends in medical school, whose father was a pathologist, and he was thinking of doing pathology as well. And so that kind of raised the question for me about whether this could be a good choice for me or not. And then I did some shadowing in a pathology laboratory. And I thought that pathology is a really underappreciated and amazing field. And then during my PhD year, so I was very nervous because I loved talking to patients and I loved interacting with patients. And, and I'm kind of an outgoing person. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to miss clinics and I'm going to miss seeing patients. But then the 4 years that I was a PhD student, I realized that I haven't seen patients in 4 years and I'm still pretty happy. So it ended up solidifying for me the fact that, okay, pathology does work for me. And specifically heme path, Matthew, I have to tell you that heme path is incredible. It is just incredible. The fact that I have the expertise now to look at someone's blood cells or to look at their bone marrow cells and give the definitive diagnosis that allows them to be diagnosed, obviously, and treated appropriately is a very awesome responsibility, to me. And I think that pathology in general is effectively like, you are doing patient care. It's direct patient care. My patients, I don't see them physically, but I see the most intimate parts of them. I see their cells and I interpret their cells and I tell the treating physician what is going on with the patient. And that is an incredibly intellectual and, powerful, responsibility-driven position to be in. And it makes us very humble people because the words we write on paper change the life of a person, right? I mean, can you imagine if I write leukemia on a report, that person's life has changed forever. And before that moment, you can be guessing, you can do radiology, you can do other things, you can be guessing about what it is. But until I sign that report, the person actually doesn't have the disease, And so And I think that I ended up choosing heme path specifically because I'm very intrigued by the hematopoietic system and immunology. I think it's extremely fascinating. I think that the way hematopathology is practiced in the United States, we have access to the bone marrow core biopsy, the aspirate smear, we do flow cytometry, we do cytogenetics, molecular genetics, and it's coming together. It's like an orchestra of unbelievable kind of things that we put together as a pathologist, and we issue a report which basically guides the treatment for the patient. And so that's, I mean, and I'm happy, Matthew, to talk to you separately about HemePath if that interests you. But, in HemeOnc, obviously HemeOnc is an incredible field, right? You guide the patient through chemotherapy, you move the chemotherapy up and down, right? But to be honest with you, that doesn't intrigue me as much, right? The fact that it'll be like 6 chemotherapeutic regimens, and then they're like some, the patient will be sick, and then they're going to have complications, and then you have to treat the complications. I have this privilege of being able to see what I see, report what I see, and go home. And everything, and somebody else takes care of the stuff afterwards. I think it's an incredible position to be in. And I know Ranjan is noting that I do see this. I really think about my patients. I don't know what they look like, but I know who their names are. I can sometimes my residents and fellows are like, oh, so and so's bone marrow is back, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that case with this this patient with. I know them. I mean, I'm familiar with what's going on with them, and so I feel like I'm a core member of their physician team. And I think that in general, medical students don't realize that pathologists are an extremely important core member of the patient's care team. I forgot what the question was, but I hope I answered it.
No, it was very thorough. Don't worry. So maybe since we're already discussing a little bit about your passion about pathology, could you talk a little bit about your project, pathellective.com?
Sure, absolutely. So all of you should be familiar with pathellective.com. Okay, it is a free resource. I'm going to put it in the chat. When the pandemic happened, obviously that pathology isn't a core rotation in clinical years. It's an elective that students can choose to do. And when the pandemic happened, the elective stopped because people weren't coming to campus anymore. So me, being the person who tries to make sure that everyone gets a pathology experience, wanted to bring the elective to the students. And so I asked one of my medical students, incredible student who's right now in the pathology math cycle, Cullen Lilly. He was an M1 at the time. And I said, have you ever made a website? And he said, no, Dr. Mirza, I've never made a website. And I said, I have never made one either, but I think we're going to make a website. So because I am pretty active on pathology social media, and I hope that you all can follow me if you are. Here, I'm going to put down, this is my Twitter handle. You should follow me there. And then this is my Instagram handle. You should follow me there too. But the point is that I got together with a group of unbelievable pathologists. And in 3 months, we had this incredible website that was ready to go. And it's a modular free website. You can click into different modules and take lessons. You get certificates. It's, you can't count this as US clinical experience. That's the first question all IMGs ask me. And I'm like, come on, guys, you understand that going to a website does not mean it's US clinical experience. But obviously, it's something that's really helpful, I find. And now, I just checked yesterday because I was giving a talk about it to my HemeOnc teams. We have 219,000 users of this website. So it's a pretty incredible resource. It's basically every continent in the country, in the world, has accessed to it except for Antarctica. And I was, one of my friends is actually traveling to Antarctica, and she said that she would try to get the internet there and log into PathElective just so that we have a user from Antarctica as well. So if anyone listening is going to Antarctica, please log in from Antarctica.
Oh my God, I really love that. I love that. And I am sure that everyone here is very inspired by your enthusiasm about pathology. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Moving on to another aspect of the interview, are there any tips you would like to share for IMGs who are going through the interviews now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share tips, but more importantly, if you have questions, ask me. I'm happy to answer specific questions. So tips. All right. So first, when you get an interview call, you need to, and you get the interview day, the schedule, find out about the program, learn what you can about the people who are interviewing you, research the program in advance, have some questions ready, um, about your physical appearance, dress appropriately, sit in the middle of the screen, be well lit, have either a plain background or a background that is interesting, and be ready to talk about anything in the background. So if it's in your background, I'm going to ask you about it. Yasmin knows this. Okay. Um, then speak clearly and look into the camera when you're speaking, right? So right now I'm trying to speak to the camera, although I can see all of you on my screen, but I still try to talk to you directly because I feel like otherwise there's no engagement. Don't be shifty. Don't be shifting around and doing all sorts of distracting things. If you are going to read a question off a piece of paper, don't do this while talking. Go like this and like read the question. Tell them, say, actually, I do have, so you can use this, for example, you can say, actually, I do have a couple of questions for you. Is it okay if I read from my list? And they'll be like, of course, right? And so then you can look at the list and it doesn't seem like you're distracted. Let me also tell you one other thing. If you are on your laptop, you see these things, most of us have them. They're called glasses. And what I can see when you're on my screen is that when you're scrolling through different pages, I can see the reflection on your glasses. And that to me is the most irritating thing anyone can do. Like, bro or sis, you're talking to me in an interview. Can you please not scroll through the internet when we're talking? It is very disrespectful. So I think that this is common sense, you guys. Like, I'm not talking about rocket science here. Like, these are common sense things, right? So don't be too shifty, don't be too distracted, speak clearly. Many of us have accents, so we have to overcome this idea of people being able to understand us. And one of the best way to do this is to just slow down. I speak very fast, and I've always been asked to slow down. And I would recommend, I mean, you can't be so slow that you become boring. So you have to show some passion, but you have to speak at a pace that can be understandable, especially if your accent is kind of heavy, right? So I think that those are the things that I would kind of start off by saying are tips and tricks, right? I think that in general, all the people that I'm seeing who have cameras on, like, your situations are very decent. Like, all of you would be perfectly, I'm sure Hafa would probably put on a suit, but other than that, I think that everyone else is pretty decently dressed for an interview setting. And if there are any other tips and tricks you'd like, questions that you're thinking of, burning questions about the interviews, please put them in the chat. I'm happy to share them.
Thank you so much. This is a great answer. We always have a lot of people that ask for tips, and so we'll help a lot of IMGs. And then the next question, were there any perceived biases or prejudice experience in your career as an IMG?
So I would say that there will always be, and I'm speaking honestly here, I think that there'll always be some people who will show bias. There might be some people who show positive bias, and there will be some people who show some negative bias. And I think that I'd be lying if I would be lying if I told you that it's not going to happen. So I think that it will happen. You should be mentally prepared for it to happen. I received statements like, well, I don't know what they do where you come from, but here in the United States, it's like these microaggressions, okay, which all of us are just taught to ignore. But I think that the world is changing. I did my residency in 2010 and finished with fellowship in 2015. And this older generation of individuals who can be very biased is changing. The United States approach to equity, inclusion, and diversity has changed, right? I think people are now approaching things in a way that was very different from 10 years ago. And I think that it's a good move in the right direction. Do we still have a long way to go? Yeah, we definitely do. But I would say that, there's definitely been prejudice. I mean, can you imagine, like, think about my visa being rejected, right? I mean, that if that's not the biggest prejudice, what is? When we were trying to buy our first car, there was a thing in the United States called the Patriot Act, in which basically because of 9/11, they could say no to any loans that anyone was kind of applying for, right? And so there were tons of things that we had to overcome, which are not problems for people anymore, so to speak. But, I think that with every challenge is an opportunity, and we learn from those opportunities. And that's what I would recommend you do. The one thing I would say is that in general, I think that for most international medical graduates, we're really taught to have imposter syndrome. Like we really think that we don't belong, or that, our knowledge isn't good enough, or that just because we speak with an accent. I would say that, embrace your differences and be proud of them. Don't be cocky and overconfident. Like nobody likes that, right? But be polite, but firm, be gentle but forceful at the same time if you need to be. I think that don't hold back from sharing your opinion, or being proud of your heritage, or being proud of your accent, or being proud of your training. And there will be things that we all need to get better at, and be open to those, be open to positive feedback, be open to constructive criticism, and change the way you are to become better. Like it's a journey of becoming better all the time, right? So whether, and of course, if somebody gives you positive feedback in a good way, that's great. But some people don't know how to give feedback, right? And so try and take it as, from a better angle, that, they were just trying to help you. But when it comes to microaggressions, there is no space for this anymore, right? And so I think that knowing where you are, what you believe, who you love, like you should be proud of all of those things.
Incredible answer, Dr. Mirza. Thank you so much. Actually, there's a question regarding thank you letters, if you have any opinions about that.
Yeah, so I think that there will be institutions that will say, please do not send us thank you letters. If you interview at an institution that says, please do not send us thank you letters, please don't send them, okay? Because you have to listen to them. That's the first most important thing. If you interview at a place which doesn't have any recommendations for thank you letters, I personally think thank you letters are helpful. You interviewed with someone and you thank you for them, but there's some rules. One, don't go crazy sending letters all the time, okay? Let's be real. Some people go nuts, all right? You don't want that. You want to be remembered for the right reasons. If someone emails me every day with a thank you note, I will remember them, but I will not remember them in a good way, okay? If you do write thank you letters, please remember that most often the search committee will forward the thank you letters to your file. And if you have copy pasted the same thank you letter to like 20 people, we will know because we will see that the thank you letters were the same. Now, is there something wrong in that? No, it's not criminal, but it doesn't show uniqueness. So I would say that if you're sending multiple thank you notes, you should personalize them. So to me, the best thank you notes are those that come with this knowledge that Dr. Mirza, I interviewed with you on this particular day. I really enjoyed my day at Loyola Pathology. I think that your program is pretty excellent. And I really loved our conversation about gardening and Star Wars, whatever it is, right, Yasmin? Yeah. So, and then, and I hope, and something. So then I'll be like, okay, you know what? Yasmin was writing to me. She wasn't writing to someone generic or some whatever. And the other thing, let me tell you, exactly, Yasmin. Do you know what happens with copy paste? If you copy paste part of your response in an Outlook format or even in Gmail, when it comes to me, you know what's going to happen? The fonts are different. There are so many times when I see an email in which there are two different fonts, and then I can tell immediately that part of that was copy pasted. And I think it is the tackiest thing. So please don't do that. So let me tell you some advice. When you copy paste something, paste it as text only. Take out all of the formatting. Okay, that is the best way to do it. Like, listen, no one is going to tell you this, but all of us look at this, okay, and we think that it's very crappy when the fonts are in two different kind of fonts. So that's what I would say about thank you notes. And remember to thank the program coordinator. She or he or they will do the most amount of work. Thank chief residents if you interview with them. Like, why not? Because ultimately a good program should be taking input from all of these individuals when they're making their rank order list.
Thank you so
Learn how
much,
to,
Dr. Mirza,
learn how to
for
optimize.
yeah, thank you so much. That was a very, very good advice. Yeah. It's so helpful. I'm applying this year too, and it's very like in this process we get kind of anxious with every detail, so that's very helpful. And finally, which final piece of advice would you give to IMGs to succeed in the USA based on your experience?
Final piece of advice. It's tough, it's tough. All right. So I'm going to say a few things and I'm saying them in the best possible spirit. Okay. I think that my advice to you is to put yourself in a program director's shoes. It's the best advice that I can give you. If, for example, you graduated more than a decade ago and you have done nothing and I'm going to give you pathology examples, and you've done nothing about pathology in the last 10 years, and you failed step one time before passing it, and your letters of recommendation are just so, and you're applying to a program which, the program director's ethnicity is the same as your ethnicity. How do you think this program director is going to back you up? Tell me, So I think that what I'm trying to tell you is there are two things that I will tell you. Oh, three things. One, be optimistic. You have to be optimistic. So there's no room for glass half empty. It always has to be glass half full so that you keep motivated and keep going. But number two, be realistic. Don't be unrealistic about what your chances are. If you're trying to apply for orthopedic surgery and you have no orthopedic surgery experience, your scores are poor and no one knows about your medical institution, these are obstacles that you have to consider. So will that mean that you have to do research in orthopedic surgery, come and make connections in orthopedic surgery? You have to be realistic. So be optimistic and be realistic. And then the third thing I already mentioned was, put yourself, if you have a question, all the questions that you asked me, thank you letters, what tips, all of the stuff, it's a simple answer. Put yourself in a program director's shoes. Imagine that you're the program director. What would they want? Would you want them to email you every day? Would you want that, would you want better scores or lower scores? Would you want better letters or poorer letters? I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Being a program director is not rocket science, right? I mean, you basically are now thinking about who has the potential for academic success and who has the potential to be a good team player in this team of residency that we are now a part of, right? And so those are the things I think you should always remember. Matthew, my favorite stain is the right gimsa in the bone marrow. The right gimsa in the bone marrow is the most beautiful stain. It looks like it is watercolors, all the granules and the nuclear features. It is just beautiful. In fact, here, hold on a second. I love pathology art, so I'm like unblurring my background, but we do a pathology art exhibition in my institution every year. I kind of run it and curate it, and so you'll notice there's so many, like they're everywhere. So like I get like art from everywhere. Anyway, so the point is that the Gimsa, I think, is just a beautiful stain.
Oh, I love that art exhibition. It's amazing. Yeah, so thank you so much. Does anyone have any other question?
And you guys don't have to be shy. If you want to just open up your cameras and say hello, you can. It's only like 16 people in this room. Like, I think that's the beauty of making connections, right? Yes,
Yeah,
you can
course,
absolutely send us paintings and drawings. You absolutely can, 100%. 100%. You can send it to me digitally. I'll print it and then we can post it on the walls, because I actually we create like a museum outside in the hallway. So I'm happy to do it. You just need to title it and tell me kind of what it means, but it has to be pathology related art.
And is there a way that we can see that on Twitter or website?
So yeah, I mean, I typically take some pictures of like the art pieces, but I agree. I think maybe I should consider putting them on a website. I just don't have enough help.
Oh,
You
I
know, I
see.
mean,
Yeah, that would
got,
be
you know,
awesome.
between all the jobs that I do, I feel like it's difficult for me to, but I think it would be really great if we put them on the website, you know, like our website, or just had like a pathology art page. I think it would be cool.
Yeah, that would be beautiful. I would love to see that.
Matthew, what do you want to help in? The art? I think he wants to help in the art. Would you, I guess you'd have to be here physically to help in the art.
Perhaps he's talking about helping you with the website. If
Oh,
there's
yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Email me, Matthew. Maybe we can come up with something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So if okay, so if anyone has a question, so I think we can finish. Thank you so much, Dr. Mirza, for being here. It was an amazing session. I absolutely love your love for pathology and all your advice. It's so helpful. So thank you so much for taking your time to be here with us. Yeah, so have a nice day, everyone, and we'll see you all tomorrow in another VMR.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.